What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we are getting into Justice League No Justice Part Deuce. Part Dose. Part Deuce. This is shaping up to be a pretty solid story. I mean, this is really awesome. Again, it's the same thing we said in the beginning of the last video. When it comes to Scott Snyder, he's one of those guys where he can write anything and it always turns out to be good. Like I've never been disappointed by anything Scott Snyder's ever written. Like I've never read it and just kind of been like, it was okay. Like his, I mean, everything he touches is gold. Plus he's also a really cool guy to talk to. But with Justice League No Justice, this is one of those cool situations because initially this kind of turned out, or at least it seemed on its surface, to be the story where DC was just like introducing Omega Titans, which was like DC's version of the Celestials and Galactus combined into like a singular set of beings. But this really seems to be more world building than anything else, adding a lot more stuff into the realm of DC. But what we talked about in the last video is that you would essentially had like a version of Brainiac that had shown up on Earth and basically grabbed all the Earth superheroes and then whisked them off to the far side of the universe to basically the planet Kolu, which is the home planet of Brainiac himself. And the result was that he basically said there are these beings called Omega Titans. When you guys broke the source wall, the wall at the edge of the universe, these Omega Titans came through, and now they're basically traveling from planet to planet, and they're going to essentially destroy them, depending on which aspect of the Omega Titans the planet's more conducive to. That's the way this unfolds. Now, of course, again, we'll get more into that as we get through this video, but the idea was that because there was a source wall, and like Amanda Waller didn't know about it, the federal government of the United States didn't know about it, her response was, well, what else are they hiding? And so what they ended up doing, or what she ended up doing, was grabbing the best psychics all across the entire landscape of the DC universe, or at least on Earth, channeling all their energies and basically breaking into the mind of Brainiac when he had taken the Earth superheroes to his home planet. And in the process of doing so, while she did learn a lot of the secrets Brainiac had, she also basically destroyed him. And so the result is that Earth superheroes are basically stuck on Kolu with no real idea of what it is that they're doing. And so in response to this, Amanda Waller basically picks up the slack and says, okay, like we know that planet Earth basically has like this seed, and this seed will give birth to like 4 trees. And whichever one of these trees grows, that's the Omega Titan that's going to be coming here to destroy the planet. And so for her, it's really like trying to understand what's going on, really more so than anything else. And that's kind of the crazy thing. When it comes to Amanda Waller, she's ruthless in a lot of ways. She'll do whatever she needs to do in order to get the information she needs. The issue with this is that while she's poking around, she's basically met by Green Arrow, by Oliver Queen. Now, his arrival here to confront Amanda Waller is really an indication of just how dire things are. But before we jump into that, I want to switch over to planet Kolu, which is where we actually end up traveling to. And it's kind of crazy because this giant Omega Titan is basically just standing there, biding its time, getting ready to consume the world. Now, this is one of the things to bear in mind when it comes to situations like this. When you have beings of such immense power, one of the things that comic book companies and one of the things writers will do is they'll basically kind of transpose time, and they'll say, well, you know, to this being, time passes differently. If you have a being who's been alive for billions and billions of years, then like the passage of a few minutes or an hour is basically irrelevant to them. It's the blink of an eye. And the time it takes for this Omega Titan to arrive, to begin the process of consuming the world, for it to finish consuming the world and then leave, as far as this Omega Titan's concerned, it amounts to what's basically seconds. But for everybody here who's looking at this event unfold, it seems to take a couple hours or something like that. And so the other part of this is that in their mind, it's just a matter of basically getting through and trying to figure out what Brainiac's plan is, because basically Brainiac was destroyed before they figured it all out. All they knew is that Brainiac split them into teams for a reason, and that's it. That's the only thing they really have to go on. But in the middle of this, they're suddenly met by the immersion of these giant trees. Now, this is where things really begin to kick in, and this is where we really start to get this explanation. The way this works is you've got 4 Omega Titans, and we talked about them before. You basically have Wisdom, Chaos, Mystery, and Entropy. And the idea is that these Omega Titans will show up to a planet that's basically in direct relation to whatever that Omega Titan is. So in this instance, 4 trees do crop up on this planet, but the Wisdom tree is the one that's actually growing and immersed with energy. And what that means is that this planet is more conducive to wisdom. It's kind of a way to sort of create a signal to say, this is the Omega Titan that's going to be coming here, kind of firing a flare, so to speak, into the air. Now, right off the bat, and this is exactly what to expect, and this is one of the reasons why Scott Snyder writing is so cool. Scott Snyder is like this master at writing about characters, and that's what works. He's such a good character writer. Like Sinestro, for example. I mean, you know, as far as I'm aware, Scott Snyder's never written Green Lantern, but his ability to write Sinestro here is exactly what we would expect, because when you have basically Batman who says, look, we don't know what Brainiac's plan is. Brainiac's always been a bad guy. We can't trust him. We're going to reform these teams in our own image, and then we're going to go forward. The first thing Sinestro says is like, I lead armies of people. I'm not a follower, and I'm not following anybody here. And it works perfect. It fits in perfectly with this story. But then you have Martian Manhunter and you have Lex Luthor. And that's why this is cool, because Lex Luthor basically chimes in and says, all of you guys are acting like idiots right now. Brainiac, like whether you want to admit it or not, Brainiac, the version of Brainiac that brought us here and every version of Brainiac that exists out there is way ahead of us. We're sitting on a planet of the smartest people to ever exist in the history of the universe. Basically, we've been brought here by a version of Brainiac that's smarter than all of these people and is certainly smarter than us. Yet somehow you think it makes sense to you to believe that you know better than Brainiac does. He split us into teams for a reason. We should act accordingly. And that's awesome. It's so cool here. And that's one of the reasons why I like Lex Luthor. Right now in DC Rebirth, Lex Luthor is really kind of being moved in the direction of going back to being a bad guy, which is kind of disappointing because him being a good guy was like a huge break away from the status quo. And there's been so much great writing with that whole thing. But regardless what stance DC takes when it comes to the character of Lex Luthor, the consistent factor has always been that Lex Luthor is exceedingly smart. And when it comes down to it, if you have to make the choice of whether or not Lex Luthor's on your team, it's not even an argument of, being on the devil's right hand and in his path. It's a matter of he's a guy that's got it where it counts. He's got the brain and he's a guy you definitely want, like him or Batman. And so that's kind of the cool thing is while he's not necessarily viewed by everybody as a legitimate superhero, despite the fact that he tries to be, at the end of the day, they're like, but it is Lex Luthor. And like, he is pretty damn smart. So we should probably listen to him. And so Batman kind of responds by simply saying, well, as long as there's a member of the Justice League on each team, then we can go along with this plan and we can do whatever we have to do. At this point, we switch over to like the teams traveling to the 4 trees, Entropy, Wonder, Mystery, Wisdom. And it's kind of cool here because what we end up finding out is kind of what we knew before, in the sense that like the Wisdom tree is the one that's really, really growing. And that's because of the fact that Omega Titan is here. It's the one tree they kind of have to figure everything out for. But for the other ones, what we ended up finding out, or at least as it was explained by Brainiac to the group, was that these Omega Titans basically arrive here because one tree is essentially like outgrowing all the others, meaning that the world needs to be consumed. But the idea is basically jumpstart all 4 trees, get all 4 trees growing back to where they need to be, and then you can basically send the Omega Titans off. At least that seems to be the case. Either that or I guess all 4 Omega Titans would show up here and consume the whole planet. I have no idea. But because only one Omega Titan can consume a planet at any point in time, then having one planet that consists of all 4 trees seems to be the best step to take. But remember, they're basically just like running on guesses and hearsay. There's no absolute guarantee that this will even work. They're just going based on what they believe to be right. And so as they're going through and as they're investigating various things, it is cool here because what ends up happening is that once they basically get to the tree that deals with deals with mystery, they start to go through and realize this tree is basically filled with planets. And this really feeds into the nature of what Brainiac did, right? Like, DC kind of modified the origin of Brainiac in the New 52 in the sense that what you saw was that there was a giant group that was leaving the 5th dimension and they were traveling around the universe and they were, or at least traveling around various places and destroying entire worlds. And the original Brainiac's idea was, well, we can save this from happening by like saving pieces of worlds. And that was the reason why he would travel from one world to the next and like take sections of it and throw it into a bottle. What's been going on here is entire worlds have been bottled. Now, this is the world building part. This is actually one of the smartest things I've seen done. The idea is, and the question they have is, if we're going to basically get this tree going, it's much like the 5th element, right? With those different bricks, whatever it is, fire to fire, water to water, wind to wind, dirt to dirt. It's that whole situation. If you never saw 5th element, don't worry about that. But that's basically what's going on here. They have to create mystery. They have to create chaos. They have to create a circumstance where no one knows what's going to happen. And the best way to do that is to free all these worlds. But these are worlds of races that have long since, that had long since believed to have been extinct. No one in the modern era has even seen these, and they don't even know what's on these worlds. They have no idea what's here, but that's the basis. It's the risk. They have to release them all. But the cool thing about this is that it's kind of Scott Snyder saying, well, if all these worlds are released, then that's all stuff that we haven't seen before, and it's all stuff that we can write about in the future of DC Comics. And where everybody kind of debates the pros and cons, we have no clue what could take place here. Different people have different motivations. Despite the fact that these motivations may be altruistic or they may be selfish, the fact remains they can basically free these worlds. The problem with this is that they can't pull it off. And the reason why they can't pull it off is there's a somewhat of a disruption field that comes from like each one of these trees. And so that's where they start to run into the caveat of like, they have to have Brainiac because they can't get into any one of these devices. They can't actually implement the plan. And so where each member of the Justice League League teams, communicates with the other and tells them what's going on, they're all running into the exact same circumstance. They're reaching what amounts to basically an invisible wall, and they can't pull it off. And so in response to all this, while it's all going on, suddenly this voice chimes out of nowhere and simply says, did you guys really believe it was going to be that simple? That these Omega Titans who show up to these planets would basically create a system that anybody could disrupt, and then in turn just allow for their defeat. And so what this guy basically says is like, there's nothing you can do here. This planet's dead. There never was anything you could ever do about it. Brainiac didn't bring you here because he believes you guys can genuinely stop this. He brought you here because he wanted your powers. And we end up finding out the person that's basically revealing all this is Vril Dox 2, Brainiac 2.0. Now, this is kind of crazy here because as far as I'm aware in DC Comics, we have not seen Brainiac 2 in New 52, like post 2011. He's not been in DC Comics since before the New 52 launched. Now, the way this originally worked out, and he goes way back, like he was even before Crisis on Infinite Earths. But the way this played out originally was that Vril Dox 2 or Brainiac 2.0 was like the son of Brainiac. Now, in some stories, in the really old pre-Crisis stories, it was just a kid he adopted, that Brainiac adopted basically, and like kind of raised him to turn him into the new Brainiac. In like more modern stories, it was basically just a version created by the original Brainiac. But the consistent factor here, and really the more modern stories, is that like Brainiac 2.0 never really saw himself as his father. He did not want to be like his dad. And so that's where things get kind of hairy here, is we don't know what this version of Brainiac 2.0 is going to be. Is it going to be post-Crisis version between 1986 and 2011, where he's basically more of a hero than anything else? Or is he going to be just like the original Brainiac, where he's a bad guy now? But because of the fact that this is DC Rebirth and it's basically designed to bring back a lot of things from before 2011, I would err on the side of caution and say he's probably a good guy and he's going to be the one saving grace. And this seems to be evidenced by the fact that like the Justice League teams need a version of Brainiac to pull this off. And for the most part, I don't really see any other version of Brainiac coming back. So the nature of Scott Snyder's storytelling isn't really to focus on like one thing. So I believe there's probably going to be a lot more surprises in store as this story goes on. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.